Her daughter-in-law yanked the plate from her hands at her own Thanksgiving table. Eleanor Hayes, retired schoolteacher and widow, didn't flinch. Matt, her only son, just looked away while the room swallowed the silence. By morning, their names would vanish from her deed, her accounts, and every shred of legal power they'd stolen. She'd gifted them the house once, now she was taking it back, and when they tried to stop her, the process server knocked before dessert. "We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence, it lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe." The cranberry sauce hadn't even settled on the china when it happened. I was mid-bite, fork halfway to my mouth, sweet potatoes trembling at the tip, when Lauren leaned over and yanked my plate straight out from under me like I was a child reaching for dessert before finishing her peas. "You've had enough, Grandma." She said it with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The room snapped silent. The carving knife froze in Reggie's hand across the table. My niece Amanda's fork paused just above her mouth. Even the baby, bless him, stopped babbling in his high chair as if he knew something sharp had just sliced the air. But my son, my own son, Matt just sat there, staring into his wine like it might explain something. No flinch, no word. Just a little breath through his nose, like this was routine. Lauren plopped my plate down on the buffet, wiped her hands like she'd done the Lord's work, and turned back to refill Matt's wine. "Some of us still have appetites," she said, with a laugh that pinged around the room and died like a bird hitting glass. I folded my napkin slowly, neatly, precisely. My hands were trembling, but I made sure no one could see it. My voice would have broken if I tried to speak, so I didn't. I stood up carefully, smoothing the front of my cardigan like I'd just remembered something in the oven. "Excuse me," I murmured. No one stopped me. No one looked up. I walked down the hallway I once painted myself, moss green with little crown molding details I'd labored over for weeks after the wedding gift, and stepped into the kitchen. The smell of roast turkey and clove hit me hard, but it was the dishwasher's hum that gave me something to focus on. That soft, constant hum kept me from crying right there on the linoleum. I opened the back door for air. The November chill cut through my sweater and pricked at my skin, but I welcomed it. It grounded me, reminded me I was still here, still real, not some ghost floating in the house I'd built. When I came back in, I didn't return to the table. Instead, I went to the far end of the house, to a door they never bothered with anymore. The handle still stuck a little, the way it always had. Inside, the old home office was dim and stale, papers stacked high, forgotten school trophies collecting dust. But I knew exactly where it was. Third drawer down, beneath the folder labeled Hayes Family Trust. I pulled it out, and there it was, crisp, official, bearing my name in bold serif font, Eleanor M. Hayes, Life Estate Grantor. My heart beat slow and sure. My late husband and I had structured it carefully, lawyered up and notarized, when we gave the house to Matt and Lauren as a wedding present. But it hadn't been a full surrender. No. It was a life estate with reversibility. My signature was the hinge, they just never read the fine print. I stared at the document for a long while. My reflection stared back from the plastic sleeve, softer now, older, but with that same sharp fire in the eyes that got me through decades wrangling middle schoolers and bureaucrats alike. Down the hall I could hear the clinking of forks, forced laughter, the awkward reshuffling of conversation. I imagined Lauren sitting at the head of my table, hands flying as she recounted some story, Matt nodding along like a man half absorbed in his own shadow. I pressed the title document flat against the desk and whispered to no one but the walls that still remembered me. Let's see who's had enough when I pull the floor out from under her. It was one of those soft, grateful tears you rarely see in grown men, especially sons. "Mom," he'd said, voice cracking as I pressed the old brass key into his palm. "Are you sure?" I smiled and nodded, pretending not to feel the sharp pinch in my chest. The house wasn't just walls and plumbing. It was where he took his first steps, where his father died holding my hand. But I told myself it was a new chapter, a gesture of love, a legacy. "We'll take care of it," Lauren chimed in that day, lips stretched in a practiced smile. "And of you." The only condition had been that I'd stay in the guest suite, not just a room, my suite. With its bay window and lilac wallpaper I'd chosen myself. They agreed, enthusiastically even, at the time. Now, 7 years later, the house barely remembered me. Lauren's touch was everywhere. Sleek monochrome in place of warm tones, expensive light fixtures that blinded instead of glowed. My old bookshelf was gone, replaced with some chrome monstrosity filled with curated knickknacks and books with broken spines. Even the scent of the place had changed. Once cinnamon and coffee, now sterile eucalyptus and lavender cleaner. I had become background noise in my own home. They stopped calling it ours long ago. Now it was their house, their renovation, their lifestyle. I was lucky to be there, as Lauren often reminded me in clipped tones just loud enough for the neighbors to overhear. I mean, not every 70-year-old gets to live rent-free in a suburban dream home, she told her Pilates friend on speakerphone once, while I watered the garden just outside the window. She should be thanking us. Thanking them. Lauren handled all the bills now. She insisted, said it streamlined everything. I only found out she'd switched my prescription plan when the pharmacist called about an unpaid refill. Furniture disappeared without warning. My favorite reading chair? Donated. The quilt from my honeymoon? Too worn. Photos of Matt as a boy gradually vanished from the living room walls, replaced by neutral landscapes and designer mirrors. Reflections, not memories. Matt said little. He always said little. His silences used to mean thoughtfulness. Now, they felt like betrayal. But I noticed everything. I kept notes. A running list of slights on a yellow legal pad hidden in my nightstand drawer, called confused in front of guests, laughed when I asked where my garden shears were, said, "You've had enough," at dinner. Twice before Thanksgiving. Matt. Absent. Eyes on phone. Always. My only solace came in the morning. Early, before Lauren woke up to start her smoothies and motivational podcasts, I'd slip out to the garden. The air was cold and wet with dew, the kind that kissed your ankles and reminded you the world was still alive. There, among the roses and marigolds, I could still breathe, still feel like me. Until last week. I found Lauren standing with a contractor near my flower beds. She wore a white puffer vest and pointed with her reusable coffee cup like a queen commanding new territory. "I'm thinking a dog run," she said. "This whole side of the yard. Raised beds are such a pain anyway." I didn't say a word, just kept pruning. Quiet, invisible, pruning. That evening, I passed the hallway and paused when I heard her voice again, on the phone, door cracked just enough. "She won't be here much longer," Lauren said, her voice dripping sweet poison. "Assisted living will do her good, and honestly, Matt's too soft to see it, but I've already found a place." The paper crackled like old leaves as I laid it out on the kitchen island, right where Lauren usually staged her pristine, Instagram-worthy charcuterie boards. Tonight it was just me and the truth, yellowed slightly at the corners but still sharp enough to draw blood. I slipped on my reading glasses and ran a finger across the heading, Retained Life Estate Agreement, Hayes Residence. My name, Eleanor M. Hayes, was stamped in black ink beside my late husband's, and below it, the clause that had been overlooked for 7 years. Full legal right to revoke, reclaim, and retain possession in perpetuity during grantor's lifetime. They hadn't read it. Not really. Lauren skimmed, smiled, and started picking out throw pillows. Matt signed with the kind of blind trust you give a parent. Or maybe just the kind of blind indifference you give a paper you didn't want to understand. But I had written it. Drafted it with my lawyer, Deborah White, formerly Ms. White, room 108 Social Studies, who had since traded tweed blazers and chalk dust for courtrooms and settlement clauses. I called her the next morning. "Ellie Hayes," she said, voice still warm and sharp like autumn cider. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "You remember the life estate we drew up?" I asked. Deborah didn't even hesitate. "Of course, you insisted on the language yourself, said, and I quote, They can have the house, but not the kingdom. I exhaled, a sound between relief and regret. Deborah, I said quietly, I think it's time I take the kingdom back. Within 2 days, she emailed me the scanned version with annotated highlights and her legal notes. I spent the better part of that evening printing and sorting. My old office was quiet, the desk lamp casting a golden circle over documents that smelled of ink and memory. I opened a fresh binder, slid in the title first, then divider tabs: verbal abuse, financial manipulation, surveillance, medical interference. Under verbal abuse, I included a photo of the sticky note Lauren left last month. Take your memory meds, don't forget. Under financial manipulation, I printed screenshots of my pharmacy billing errors, her budget spreadsheet that mysteriously removed my monthly garden allowance, and the email she sent to the HOA changing our mailing address to her personal inbox. Surveillance was trickier, less obvious, but I remembered the smart thermostat Lauren had installed, how she always seemed to know when I left my suite, how she'd scold me for sneaking snacks past 9. Matt, meanwhile, drifted through the days like a man allergic to discomfort. He came home late, left early, and kept his gaze fixed on the floor when Lauren spoke to me like I was a stain on the wallpaper. I tested him once. Matt, I said one evening while he buttered toast, did you know she's planning to turn my garden into a dog run? He blinked, forced a smile. I'm sure she just wants to use the space more efficiently. Not even a pause. Just another shovel of dirt over the roots of what we used to be, but I wasn't planting anymore. I was digging. And as I built that binder, each page a reminder, each tab a reckoning, I saw things clearly. Lauren hadn't earned control. She'd just filled a vacuum. She mistook silence for surrender. But what she didn't know was that I had given her rope, not power. On Thursday morning, I met Deborah in her office, a clean, sharp place with glass walls and cold water in real glasses. She flipped through the binder, nodding slowly, the way a doctor does before delivering a diagnosis. When she reached the guardianship clause Lauren had clearly ignored, she looked up at me. Ellie, she said, laying a palm flat on the documents, if you want to reverse this, you can. And you'd win. Matt's dress shirt sat wrinkled in the dryer for 3 days. Lauren found it while gathering linens for her book club brunch. Ellie, she said, holding it up like a dead mouse, you forgot again. I blinked, then gave her a slow smile. Did I? She stared at me a beat too long. Something flickered behind her eyes. Interest, maybe. Calculation. I turned back to the sink and scrubbed the same already clean dish for the 4th time. Let her watch me. Every game needs a performance. Mine had to be flawless. I started forgetting small things. A grocery list left on the porch, dinner burned just enough to raise a brow, my cardigan in the freezer drawer. It was enough to give her what she wanted, ammunition disguised as concern. Oh, honey, Lauren said one morning, not even bothering to hide the smirk. You mixed up the salt and sugar again. Are you feeling all right? I placed a hand to my temple. Just a bit tired, I guess. That afternoon, I found a post-it on the fridge, in bold Sharpie letters, memory meds, don't forget. The smiley face had devil horns. I peeled the note off carefully, folded it once, and tucked it into my file binder under the tab labeled Coercion Tactics. Subtle. Lauren had no idea she was becoming her own exhibit. She followed the bait like a bloodhound. Soon she was hovering in doorways when I handled kitchen knives, standing behind me with a finger on her chin when I took out the trash. She began introducing me as Ellie, my sweet mother-in-law. We're watching her memory lately, poor thing, followed by that brittle chuckle that always made me picture glass cracking. But just because I played old didn't mean I was old. 2 Tuesdays ago, I drove myself, unassisted, unannounced, to Dr. Marilyn Trent, a neurologist recommended by Deborah. I'd taught her daughter years ago. The girl had trouble with fractions but could spot a manipulator from a mile away. Must have run in the family. Dr. Trent administered a full cognitive exam, reflexes, memory recall, puzzle solving, language comprehension. When we finished, she pulled off her glasses, smiled, and said, Ellie, Your mind is as sharp as mine, and I'm 35. She handed me the signed report. I made 2 copies. That evening, Lauren slid a manila envelope across the counter while I stirred soup. "Just a quick signature," she said, with all the faux lightness of a spider fluffing its web. "Standard medical delegation, just so we're covered, in case anything ever happens." I dried my hands, picked up the pen, and smiled. Then I uncapped it, paused, and slowly capped it again. "You know what?" I said, handing it back. "I'd rather go over this with someone first. No offense, Lauren, just memory and all." Her lips thinned. "Sure," she said. But her eyes? They flared with disappointment. She wasn't ready for resistance. Later that night, I locked the envelope in the safe behind my dresser drawer, just beside my late husband's watch and the original home deed. And then came the twist. The kind of twist that doesn't knock first. Deborah called me at 9:03 a.m. the next morning. Her voice, always controlled, now had an edge. "Ellie," she said, "we need to meet. In person." My heart slowed. "What happened?" "She's filed a petition," she said. "Guardianship. Claims mental decline and endangerment to your own well-being." The room tilted slightly, not from shock, but fury. Pure, quiet fury. "She what?" I said flatly. "She attached a log of incidents, missed meals, prescription confusion, even your freezer cardigan moment. Fabricated or real? Exaggerated and opportunistic, which means we can fight it. But she's moving fast. Hearing's been scheduled already." I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter to ground myself, knuckles whitening. "I'm done playing games," I whispered. "No," Deborah said. "You're just starting to win one." There were no bees humming near the lavender, no soft rustle of petals in the breeze, no scent of damp earth. Just the sterile crunch of gravel under my slippers, sharp and final. I froze at the edge of the patio, heart thudding. My garden, my morning sanctuary, my years of pruning, tending, kneeling in the soil with aching knees, was gone. The rose beds had been ripped out like weeds, replaced with dull gray stones that sucked every ounce of color from the space. Where blossoms once bent gently toward the sun, there was now a dog bowl, a garden gnome Lauren had picked from some catalog, and a path leading nowhere. She'd done it, without asking, without a word. I dropped to my knees and ran my hands over the cold gravel. The stones were jagged, some still bearing streaks of red from the severed roots underneath. My palms stung, but I didn't stop. I clawed at the earth until I reached a small patch, just beneath where the tea roses had bloomed for 20 years, and dug my fingers into the soil. Beneath the surface, I slid in a waterproof flash drive. Black, clean. Loaded with everything: voice memos, screenshots, time-stamped videos from the nanny cam, the cognitive test results, even recordings of Lauren's cruelest jabs when she thought I was out of earshot. I packed the dirt gently around it. Like a seed, let them think the garden was dead. I was planting something far more resilient. Inside, I washed my hands slowly. The water turned pink, then clear. My fingers trembled, but not from pain. That same afternoon, Lauren swept through the kitchen like a realtor on speed. "Brunch is at 10 tomorrow," she announced, snapping open the fridge. "I ordered fresh scones from that place in Beaverton. Can you handle coffee? Just don't burn it." She tossed the instructions over her shoulder like confetti. By the time guests arrived the next morning, Lauren was glowing. She floated from room to room, her champagne flute catching the light, while she gushed about streamlining the space and finally giving the yard purpose. "I just feel like gravel is more functional," she told a woman in a beige wrap dress. "Ellie wasn't really using it, and let's be honest, roses are a bit much at her age." I served the coffee in silence. Every cup I poured felt like a choice. Mine was black and bitter. I made sure hers was strong and hot, scalding almost. I watched her sip it too quickly and wince. She didn't thank me. She never did. But I smiled. I watched them nibble on overpriced scones and compliment her throw pillows and ask for renovation tips. They sat in chairs I'd once picked out, surrounded by walls I'd painted in a house I'd built, and not one of them noticed I'd disappeared long before the roses had. By noon, the brunch was over. The clinking glasses faded and the laughter thinned like fog in the sun. Lauren buzzed around the kitchen, humming some mindless tune. I returned to my suite, kicked off my shoes, and waited. The doorbell rang at 2:14 p.m. I opened it. A man in a blue windbreaker stood with a clipboard. "Eleanor Hayes?" "Yes." "Certified delivery." He held out a thick envelope. I took it, the weight already familiar. The return address was the courthouse. I slid it open with the edge of my nail and read the bold type across the top. Guardianship petition, review and hearing notice. Date, November 23rd, 10 days, Thanksgiving Day. I laughed, once, just once. It was short and dry like the crunch of crushed gravel underfoot. I sat in Deborah's conference room, staring at the oak table where battles were drawn in ink instead of blood. My binder sat open in front of her, each tab a wound, each page a match waiting to be struck. She didn't speak for the first 5 minutes. Instead, she flipped slowly. Click, 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 pausing only to underline a date or circle a sentence. Outside, rain tapped the tall windows, soft and steady. Inside, the tension was sharper than any courtroom gavel. "This is more than enough," she said finally, her voice like tempered steel. "You've got timelines, you've got documents, you've got intent. Ellie, you've built a case stronger than most I take to trial." I swallowed. "Then we move." She looked up, studying me for a beat. "You're sure?" "Absolutely," I said. "They want me gone. I want them out first." She smiled. Not the kind you give a client, but the kind 2 soldiers share before storming the hill. We outlined everything on her whiteboard. The motion to oppose the guardianship came first, clean, factual, backed by medical documents and a signed physician's report from Dr. Trent. Then the fraud complaint, unauthorized financial decisions, verbal coercion, backdoor insurance policies, and Lauren's sticky fingers on my affairs. And then, the eviction. Lauren and Matt may have lived there, but they were tenants of assumption, not law. The revocable life estate gave me standing. And now I was revoking. I signed the papers slowly, deliberately, pen pressed hard enough to leave an impression. "He's out," I said, meaning Matt. "In the new will, everything goes to charity, legal defense, elder rights, the people who actually protect the vulnerable." Deborah nodded. "We'll notarize it today." Then came the nanny cam footage. I'd hidden the lens in the base of the antique clock beside my bed. Lauren thought it was just more clutter, part of the old lady aesthetic she loved mocking. But it had caught everything. We watched in silence as Lauren entered my suite one afternoon in yoga pants and smugness, leaned over my bedside table, and read my pill bottles aloud like she was on stage. "Take one daily for clarity. Guess you're overdue, huh, Ellie?" She laughed alone, then rolled her eyes and walked out. Another clip showed her picking through my mail. One more caught her standing in the hallway, talking on speakerphone. "No, she won't fight it. She's losing track of days. Matt says she barely remembers her own PIN number. We'll get full control by Christmas." Deborah paused the video. "You said she tried to access your Medicare?" I slid a printed login attempt record across the table. 3 failed attempts from Lauren's tablet, then a call from the Medicare office asking if I needed help managing my account. Deborah's lips thinned. "That's federal fraud." "I know." We added that to the file. Layer after layer, lie after lie. Everything she thought was invisible was now in black and white. I sat back in the chair, fingers cold but steady. She tried to rewrite me like I was some forgettable draft, erase me from the home I built, from my own son's mind. "She won't succeed," Deborah said, sealing the motion envelope. "Not with this much truth behind you." Then she looked at her watch, tapped it once, and locked eyes with me. "If we move now," she said, "they won't have time to cover their tracks." 10 days. That's all I needed. 10 days to turn this house from a cage back into a home and carve my name back into its foundation. Deborah handed me a copy of the eviction notice and gave a short nod. "You want them served at dinner?" she asked. "Before dessert," I said. "I want her to taste the fall before she has a chance to savor the win." That same afternoon, I logged into the bank account that still bore my name, my husband's legacy woven into its numbers. Lauren had kept forgetting that the house and the finances weren't gifts, but conditional trust. She and Matt had spent lavishly, assuming silence was consent, but I never stopped watching. 2 clicks, and the account was frozen. A polite little banner popped up. "Transaction suspended pending legal review. Let her try to buy wine and goat cheese for her precious dinner party now." That night, I approached Lauren in the kitchen while she was scrolling on her tablet, face glowing from the screen and self-satisfaction. "I'd like to handle Thanksgiving dinner this year," I said, folding my arms gently. She didn't even look up. "Seriously? It's kind of a lot. And you've seemed tired lately." I tilted my head. "It's tradition. And Matt always liked my cornbread stuffing." That caught her attention. A flicker of annoyance, quickly masked with a smile too sharp to be genuine. "Sure, Ellie," she said. "You do the cooking. I'll handle the aesthetics." Translation: You sweat, I perform. Perfect. Over the next few days, I planned like a general. Grocery lists were drawn in my old cursive, menus drafted and revised. I bought ingredients quietly, storing them in the mini fridge in my suite, tucked behind neatly labeled boxes that read dietary supplements and freezer meals. I made pie crust from scratch at midnight while the house slept, the butter cold and crumbly in my hands, just the way Harold liked it. I dusted cinnamon into the filling until it tasted like the last bite of autumn. Not sweet, bittersweet. The kitchen had always been my space, the garden, my therapy, and for years I'd let them both be invaded. No more. But just as I was settling into the rhythm of it, checking my court calendar, confirming the process server, making sure my dress for dinner still fit, I found the box. It was in the back of the garage, buried under fake pumpkins and unopened boxes from a failed Etsy side hustle Lauren had once tried. I'd been searching for my mother's silver carving knife, the one we used every Thanksgiving since '78. Instead, I found something else. A slim envelope taped to an appraisal folder. Inside, photos of my jewelry, handwritten valuations, and a signature that wasn't mine, but pretended to be. She'd sold them. My mother's pearl brooch, the locket Harold gave me after Matt was born. And she hadn't just sold them. She'd filed an insurance claim with my forged initials tucked neatly in the corner of the form. My hands shook. Rage crawled up my spine like a fever. She hadn't just tried to erase me. She was cashing me in piece by piece. I made copies of everything. Took photos. Labeled them. Another tab in the binder, forgery and theft. Then I went to the kitchen, opened the fridge, and pulled out the pie dough I'd saved for the lattice crust. I braided it slowly, methodically, humming under my breath. The house smelled like cinnamon and retribution. Thanksgiving was 5 days away. Thanksgiving morning arrived wrapped in fog so thick it blurred the line between ground and sky. The air was damp, still, electric, like something waiting to snap. I woke before the oven timer, before the birds, before the house began its performative stretching for the day. My dress was laid out neatly across the bed. Deep plum, velvet, long sleeves. The kind Harold always said made me look like royalty with a temper. By the time I stepped into the kitchen, Lauren was already in full stage manager mode. Curlers out, lip gloss shining, apron over her yoga set like she'd actually cooked something. She looked me up and down. That's a choice," she said, smirking. "You know, Ellie, we're hosting guests, not haunting them." I smiled, just slightly. "Then I'll make sure to stay dead quiet." She didn't catch it. She was already distracted by rearranging garnishes and yelling at Matt about folding napkins like hotel swans. The guests trickled in by 2 o'clock. Neighbors, Matt's co-workers, the Pilates friend with the smug ring light selfies, all greeted by Lauren's high-pitched chirping and wine poured like truth serum. She kissed cheeks, complimented coats, waved her manicured hands in practiced hospitality. I stayed near the kitchen, tending the roast and basting the bird. When thanked, I nodded. When praised, I deflected. "She's still so sharp in the kitchen," one woman said to Lauren. "She's got her moments," Lauren replied, as if I wasn't 3 feet away. Every dish hit the table exactly at 5 o'clock. The stuffing was golden, the cranberry tart spiked with orange zest, and the pie sat cooling beside the window like a trophy. The room filled with warmth, the clink of silverware, the hum of shallow pleasantries. I took my seat at the end of the table, where I used to sit as matriarch, now rebranded as the polite afterthought. We ate. Small talk dripped like syrup. Lauren bragged about the kitchen remodel that hadn't even been approved yet. Matt said nothing, his tie loose, eyes distant. The baby sneezed, and someone passed a cloth napkin. Then came the moment. Small. Quick. Brutal. I reached quietly for a second helping of potatoes. My fork was halfway into the bowl when Lauren's hand shot out, snatched the serving spoon, and, with a smile as wide as it was rehearsed, said, "You've had enough, Grandma." The room fell silent. Forks paused mid-air. Chewing slowed. Even the baby stopped fussing. She laughed to fill the void, that fake happy sound she used when she wanted to humiliate me and get away with it. "She's watching her starches," Lauren added, glancing around the table. "Doctor's orders, remember?" I set my fork down slowly. My hands didn't shake this time. I picked up my wine glass, let the stem rest between my fingers. Took a breath. Not to calm myself, but to sharpen what was coming. Then I stood. The legs of the chair scraped back across the wood floor, screeching like a warning bell. All eyes turned to me. "Actually," I said, voice smooth as the Merlot in my glass, "I haven't even started." The moment the stem of my wine glass touched the table, the front door creaked open. Slow. Intentional. Timed to the second. All heads turned. A man in a black wool coat stepped inside, rainwater glistening on his shoulders. His shoes clicked against the hardwood like punctuation. He held a flat manila envelope in both hands and scanned the room until his eyes landed on Lauren. "Lauren Hayes?" he asked, calm and loud enough to cut through the silence. Lauren blinked, the smile still frozen on her face like it hadn't gotten the message. "Excuse me? I'm a registered process server. I have legal documents for you." He took a step forward and extended the envelope. "You've been formally served." A collective gasp pulsed through the room. Lauren didn't move. Matt stood up so fast his chair fell backward. "Wait, what is this?" he said, eyes flicking from me to the man to the envelope like someone had just dropped a live grenade in the mashed potatoes. I took a sip of wine. "Oh, just a little something I've been cooking up longer than that turkey." Lauren finally snapped out of it and snatched the envelope from the man's hand. She ripped it open, eyes scanning furiously. Her face blanched. "You're evicting us?" she hissed. "Correct." I stood tall. "And that's not all." I stepped to the head of the table, right where she'd been holding court all evening, and laid a second envelope flat against the linen. "You're also under legal investigation for insurance fraud, attempted financial abuse, and the unlawful pursuit of guardianship through coercion." The room erupted in a chorus of muffled gasps and scraping chairs. Someone dropped a fork. The baby began to whimper. Lauren's voice cracked. "This is insane. This isn't real." "It's real," I said, unfolding a printed sheet of her fake insurance claim. "This is your handwriting. This is my forged signature. And this," I slid a printed transcript of the guardianship petition across the table, "is what you filed behind my back, citing mental decline that never existed." Matt came toward me, arms half outstretched, like he was trying to disarm a bomb. "Mom, you could have talked to us." "I tried," I said quietly, "but you were too busy watching her redesign my life in grayscale." He looked at Lauren. "Did you really file that without telling me?" Lauren spun on him. "Don't you dare act surprised. You knew she was slipping." Matt took a slow step back. The look on his face said everything. He hadn't known, not really. Guests began to shuffle toward the door, murmuring apologies and confusion. "Thank you all for coming," I called over the noise, my voice calm. "This has been my final dinner in shared captivity." Reggie, bless him, was the only one who paused to place a warm hand on my shoulder as he passed. "You need help clearing this?" he asked gently. I shook my head. "Number this one needs to sit in the air a while." Lauren was still pacing in circles, the envelope limp in her hand, mascara clinging for dear life. "You can't do this," she said, spinning toward me, voice shrill now. "This is our house." I tilted my head. "No, dear. This was my house. You just confused possession with permission." She stormed past me, muttering curses, and locked herself in the guest bathroom with a slam. Matt stayed frozen in place, jaw tight. "You just destroyed this family." I looked him straight in the eye, steady as I ever was in a classroom full of chaos. "No, Matt. I just saved what's left of it." The morning light filtered through the dining room curtains, landing on the half-empty pie dish and a glass still tipped at an angle. The air held onto the scent of roasted herbs and scorched ego. I patted through the house slowly, coffee mug warm in my hands, waiting for the echoes to catch up. Upstairs, drawers opened and slammed in a violent rhythm. Lauren's voice broke the quiet in fits. Cusses, grunts, the sound of zippers being yanked like they owed her something. I stood at the bottom of the staircase and listened, just for a moment, to the downfall she'd authored herself. "Where's the damn laptop charger? Matt!" No answer. She stormed down 10 minutes later, dragging a red hard-shell suitcase and a trash bag full of shoes that thudded against every step. Her mascara had cracked under her eyes, dried like fault lines. The wedding ring was gone. Not pocketed, gone. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs, chest heaving, eyes blazing. "You think you won?" she hissed. "You'll die alone in this mausoleum." I sipped my coffee. "At least I'll die in my own home." She shoved past me, slamming the front door behind her so hard the wreath fell off its hook and landed face down on the welcome mat. Her Uber squealed down the street not 5 minutes later, tires skipping against the curb. Matt was still upstairs. By noon, his things were piled on the driveway, suits draped over boxes, sneakers half tucked into an old gym bag, a shaving kit he hadn't touched in months. He hadn't even packed properly, just dragged out drawers and dumped them like someone trying to escape a fire. But no smoke followed him this time, just shame. He walked out the front door wearing the same college hoodie he used to sleep in during winter breaks. He looked tired, unshaven. 20 years older and 10 pounds lighter than the son I raised. "I'll come back for the rest," he muttered, not meeting my eyes. "No rush," I said. "You won't be able to get in without a locksmith anyway." He flinched, barely noticeable, but I caught it. I watched him walk to his car, glance back once, and then disappear around the corner without another word. By sunset, the locksmith had replaced every lock on the property. Front door, back gate, garage access. My house was mine again, down to the last key. I stood on the porch with the new key warm in my palm, flipping it once before slipping it onto my old lanyard. The one Harold used to joke made me look like a school bus driver. That day it felt more like armor. The texts started trickling in around 7. "You okay, Ellie? That was wild. Can't believe she said that in front of everyone. We're on your side. Let us know if you need anything." I didn't reply. I just read each one and let it sit. The house creaked differently that night, lighter, unburdened. I walked through every room, with bare feet on hardwood, flipping light switches, opening blinds, claiming space. I turned the thermostat back to a human setting, unpacked the cinnamon candle Lauren said was too vintage, and set it flickering on the mantel. But when I entered the guest bedroom, the one Matt and Lauren had turned into a minimalist museum of themselves, I froze. The bed was stripped, the drawers empty. But the nightstand, half open, revealed an envelope, cream-colored. My name written on the front in Matt's neat slanted hand, Ellie's plan. The room still smelled faintly of Lauren's perfume, artificial jasmine clinging to the walls like a stain. The nightstand drawer where I'd found it was still ajar, yawning like a mouth mid-confession. I slid my thumb under the flap. The paper inside was smooth and thick, stationery I'd bought years ago but never used. Matt had used it. That meant he planned this. Inside were 3 neatly folded pages. I unfolded them with fingers that had rearranged his crib, packed his lunchboxes, clutched his hand through fever nights. My hands had always been steady for him, but they trembled now. Mom, I know what you're going to think when you read this, and I deserve it. I should have stopped her. I should have told you what she was planning. But I didn't. I thought if I stayed close to her, I could soften it, slow it down, steer it. That's what I kept telling myself. The truth? I didn't want to choose between you two. So I let her do the choosing for me. I'm sorry. I paused, heart stuttering in my chest. The guardianship paperwork, I didn't file it. She did. But I read it before she submitted it. I let her think I was on board. I thought maybe once it went through, we could at least ensure you were cared for and that she'd stop controlling everything. I didn't realize how far she'd already gone until it was too late. My stomach turned. So he had known, not just after the fact, not just vaguely. He read it and said nothing. I know that makes me weak, maybe worse. But I never stopped loving you. That's why I left this. If she turns on me next, and she will, I want you to know where I stood, even if I didn't stand up. I was scared of losing both of you. And I did anyway. The letter ended there. No signature. Just a single tear mark, stained into the ink like a bruise that would never fade. I sat still for a long time, the pages folded back into my hands, like prayer. Grief doesn't scream. Not always. Sometimes it's just a low tide pulling every part of you under, leaving silence behind. I pressed the paper to my chest, bent over, and wept into the crook of my elbow like a woman mourning not death, but the slow, invisible disintegration of blood ties. I sobbed until my throat was raw, until I couldn't tell if I hated him or just missed the version of him that once believed I was the strongest person in the world. I almost called him. My phone was in my hand, thumb hovering over his name. Matthew. But then I looked out the bedroom window, past the frost-dusted glass, past the gravel Lauren had poured over my memories, to the empty space where my roses once grew, the garden she killed without asking, the wine glass, the eviction papers, the laughter turned sideways, all of it came rushing back. I set the phone down. Some damage doesn't need repair, just a perimeter. That afternoon, Deborah called. Her voice was calm, clipped, precise. She'd finalized the eviction filing. Lauren's name was stripped from every utility, service, and document. Matt's belongings were still on the driveway, now damp from last night's rain. It's all official, she said. They're legally and physically out. You did it. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Thank you. You okay? She asked. Not yet, I said, but I'm close. We were about to hang up when my landline rang, the old one I kept for medical appointments and government calls. I frowned. Hold on, Deborah, I've got another line. I clicked over. This is Eleanor Hayes. A woman's voice. Cold, coated in varnish. Ms. Hayes, I'm calling on behalf of Lauren Hayes. You've been named in a defamation suit filed this morning with Washington County Civil Court. The world narrowed. For what grounds? I asked calmly. Intentional infliction of emotional distress and reputational harm. Our office will be forwarding a formal copy within 24 hours. She hung up before I could speak again. I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, the hum of the dial tone echoing like the aftershock of betrayal. I clicked upload at 3:11 a.m., the room silent except for the hum of the old desktop tower and the whisper of the rain tapping against my window like it was trying to listen in. The Dropbox folder was labeled plainly, Hayes, documentation. No drama, no accusations, just facts. PDFs of forged insurance forms, audio recordings of whispered threats, nanny cam clips of Lauren mocking my memory like it was theater. Everything she thought she'd gotten away with, I'd bottled into one neat, digital Molotov cocktail, and I handed it to someone who knew how to light it, Her name was Sienna Vega. I'd taught her in 6th grade, back when her last name was spelled in bubble letters on purple notebooks, and she refused to speak above a whisper. Now she was an investigative journalist with sharp heels and sharper words, based out of Portland with a reputation for exposing institutional neglect and local corruption. She called me 2 hours after I sent the link. "Ms. Hayes," she said, her voice all grown now, laced with quiet awe. "This is everything." I didn't say much, just, "Make sure it gets seen." 3 days later, the headline landed like a stone in still water. "The Quiet Fight. How Elder Women Are Taking Back What's Theirs." Sienna didn't just quote my case, she unpacked it. She painted the picture in layers: the financial manipulation disguised as care, the fake guardianship claims, the systemic cracks that let predators slip through. My name was in bold, so was Lauren's. Within 24 hours, the article was shared by 3 local news outlets and a regional podcast. My inbox filled with messages from strangers, older women mostly, telling me their stories. How they'd been sidelined, silenced, stripped of rights by children or spouses or state workers. Some were tearful, some were furious, but all of them said the same thing: "Thank you." At noon, Deborah called with a chuckle in her voice. "Guess who dropped her defamation lawsuit this morning?" I smiled as I pulled a fresh peach tart from the oven. Let me guess. She decided she couldn't handle the heat. "She can't even handle the comments section, Ellie." That article tore through her version of the story like a buzzsaw. "She built it with lies," I said, slicing through the tart's flaky crust. "They never hold." The invitations came soon after. First from the local library, asking if I'd speak at their legal literacy workshop. Then a nonprofit group that supports elder legal rights invited me to headline their spring fundraiser. I hadn't stood in front of a crowd since my retirement party, but this felt different. This wasn't applause for what I'd done. This was space for what had been denied to so many, space I had clawed back inch by inch with evidence and fire. That night, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. A number I still knew by heart. "Matt, you didn't have to go this far." I stared at the message for a long time. My hands didn't tremble. Then I typed back, slowly, deliberately, "You didn't have to stand by and let her do it." No response came. I didn't expect one. I set the phone down, curled under the throw blanket, and looked out at the garden. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I needed to be seen. I felt solid. I felt known. Not because I was afraid, but because I wasn't. For the first time in years, I didn't need to keep one ear tuned for footsteps, one eye on shadows. The silence wasn't suffocating anymore. It was mine. The suite, once overtaken by Lauren's beige palette and sterile throw pillows, now smelled faintly of lemon oil and rosewood. I'd repainted the walls myself, soft teal, the color of morning sky right before the sun stretches. I swapped out the lighting, added a lamp with a stained glass shade that warmed the room with amber light instead of that hospital-grade white Lauren seemed to love. Even the air felt different, lighter, like the whole wing had exhaled after years of holding its breath. Outside, I began undoing the damage rock by rock. The gravel Lauren dumped where my roses used to bloom had been hauled off one bucket at a time. My gloves tore, my knees ached, but every scrape of metal on stone was penance in reverse, pulling shame from the soil to make space for something better. Reggie stopped by most mornings, just as the dew lifted off the grass. He didn't ask if I needed help. He just brought a thermos of black coffee, a folding stool, and that lopsided smile he wore since we were both 23 and full of vinegar. One afternoon, he hauled a weathered toolbox onto the lawn and said, "Let's bring that shed back to life. You up for it?" I nodded, more grateful than I let show. "As long as you don't mind working for Pi." "Store-bought or scratch?" he teased. "Scratch," I said, smirking. "Of course." He kept showing up. By the 3rd week, the shed had a new roof, a hand-carved sign that read Ellie's Tools, and a shelf just for seed catalogs and knee pads. Reggie brought over a pie himself one day, blueberry, still warm. "You didn't?" I gasped when I opened the foil. "I did," he grinned. "Used real butter and everything." I laughed, an honest one this time. not a bitter bark or a polite smile through pain, a laugh that shook something loose in my chest. At the library, I started a weekly adult literacy group, 8 women and 2 men, ages ranging from 25 to 72. Some could barely read, others wanted to write their own letters for the first time in years. They called me Mrs. Hayes until I insisted on just Ellie. One woman hugged me after class and whispered, "You make me feel like I've still got time." I held her for a second longer than I meant to. Around town, people smiled more when they saw me, some from pity maybe, but most with a kind of nod that said we saw what you did and we respect it. I didn't walk lighter, I walked fuller. Then came the envelope. It was certified, delivered by a woman in a green parka with wind-blown hair and a distracted smile. "Signature, please," she said, handing me the tablet. I signed, my pen hovering for a moment after the last stroke, stomach sinking with the familiar weight of anticipation. The envelope was thick. Return address, M.H. Legal Advocacy, Portland. I brought it inside, sat at the newly sanded kitchen table, and opened it carefully. The letterhead was clean, expensive, the first line clear, Notice of Intent to Contest Life Estate Trust, filed by Matthew Hayes. My pulse slowed to a crawl. He wasn't finished. I sat at the petitioner's table, a folder of documents in my lap, and Deborah at my side. Across from me, Matt adjusted his cufflinks with the same nervous habit he'd had since 8th grade debate, rolling them between his fingers like they could grant him more time or more courage. His lawyer, a polished woman in a gray skirt suit with a practiced frown, flipped through her binder like she was reviewing a grocery list. This wasn't about the house. Not really. This was about control, image, legacy. Matt wasn't fighting for a roof. He was fighting to rewrite the story, one where he hadn't sat in silence, hadn't watched his wife dismantle his mother with a smile, hadn't walked out with everything except a spine. But I'd lived every chapter, and I wasn't handing over the pen. The judge, a woman in her 60s with steel-colored hair and a courtroom presence that could freeze lava, looked over the file for several long minutes before lifting her eyes. "Ms. Hayes," she said, glancing at me, "you may speak." I stood. No papers, no speech, just years. "I gave my son and his wife this house as a gesture of love," I began, voice steady. "Not a surrender of my rights, not an invitation for my voice to be silenced inside my own walls." Matt stared down at the table, jaw tight. "I have lived through caretaking masked as control. I've endured gaslighting dressed in concern. I was told I was forgetful while I was being erased." The courtroom was still, the only sound the faint ticking of the judge's clock behind her. "But I am not senile. I am not fragile. And I am certainly not gone. What I am is done. Done being quiet so someone else can feel comfortable." I paused, then added, "This house was never just a house. It was my marriage, my motherhood, my identity, and I will not be rewritten out of it." The judge gave a single nod, then turned to Matt. His lawyer rose, smoothing her skirt. "Your Honor, my client simply seeks clarity on the trust. He questions the stability of the life estate agreement." The judge raised her hand. "Sit," she said flatly. The lawyer sat. The judge looked at Matt. "Do you wish to speak?" He looked up at me. For a moment, just one, I saw the boy I once knew. The boy who built birdhouses with Harold, who cried when his goldfish died, who kissed my cheek before every first day of school. Then it vanished. "No," he said, and looked away. The judge sighed. "I've reviewed the documents, the original estate structure, the medical evaluations, and the legal filings. The facts are clear." She folded her hands. "The court recognizes the validity of Eleanor Hayes's revocable life estate. The contestation is denied. The trust remains intact." Gavel. One sharp knock. Matt stood before the echo had faded. He didn't look at me, didn't nod, just turned and walked out the side door like he was late for lunch. And just like that, it was over. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. Outside the courthouse, the sky was heavy with winter, but the air tasted like freedom. Crisp, clean, like pine and cold steel. Deborah handed me a thermos of coffee and said, "You're free now, Ellie." Completely. I turned toward her, the words still sinking in. Then I reached into my purse and pulled out the donation slip. A signed check for $50,000 made out to a local women's legal defense fund. Let's make sure the next woman doesn't have to fight this hard. Outside, the last of the golden leaves clung to the maple tree out back, clapping softly in the wind. Inside, the house was full, not with performance, not with posturing, but with presence, with life. I sat at the head of the table, the same chair Lauren once dismissed as too bulky and dated. The same one she tried to phase out with a mid-century knockoff from her catalog order. I'd sanded and restained it myself last spring, right after the final court hearing. It felt good to claim its curves again. 12 women filled the long table with stories, jokes, and laughter. That was loud and real and earned. Most of them came from the shelter just outside town, the transitional housing unit run by the local women's center. I'd met them during my literacy classes. Some had escaped husbands, others had been pushed out by sons or sisters or so-called friends. All of them had known what it meant to be silenced, but not today. Today they passed green beans and stuffing like communion. One had brought a homemade cranberry sauce with orange peel and cinnamon, another baked biscuits from scratch. One of the youngest women, barely out of her 20s and just months sober, arrived carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers. She placed it beside my plate without a word. The same wine glass from last year sat beside me, crystal, delicate, rim slightly chipped. I'd kept it, cleaned it, preserved it not as a memory of humiliation, but a monument to what I survived. Reggie stood at the end of the table, still in his flannel and jeans, carving with precision like he was performing surgery. "Dark meat, light meat, or a little of both?" he asked down the line. "Both," came a voice from the middle, followed by laughter. I took in the sounds. Laughter that wasn't forced, forks against ceramic, the scrape of chair legs on hardwood, someone humming to the background jazz. The air smelled like sage and roasted garlic. I'd opened all the windows that morning to let the fresh air chase out anything stale. Across the room, the garden stretched proudly beyond the patio doors. The roses had come back stronger than I expected. Deep reds, yellows, and one stubborn ivory bush that had refused to bloom under Lauren's gravel. I'd named that one Eleanor II. It leaned hard toward the sun, defiant. A small hand touched mine. "You okay?" one of the women whispered, her voice a mixture of hope and hesitation. I looked at her, round cheeks, thin frame, a bruise still faint at the edge of her jaw that hadn't quite faded. I smiled and turned my hand over, lacing my fingers gently with hers. "I'm better than okay," I said. "I'm home." Dessert came. 3 pies, pecan, apple, and the bittersweet chocolate one I'd baked the night before, just like Harold always liked. I served that one myself, plate by plate. "Why chocolate at Thanksgiving?" someone asked with a smirk. "Because it reminds you that sweet isn't always the goal," I said. "Sometimes it's the bitter that teaches you the most." When the table finally quieted, when the laughter gave way to full bellies and soft eyes, I raised my glass, not to toast, but to mark the moment. "This table didn't always feel like mine," I said, "but I carved it back, inch by inch, not for revenge, but for peace." A beat passed, a few nods, then a slow, warm applause.